In mock trial and in real life, the best kept secret before trial is your theory of the case, how you're going to prove what you have to prove, and the theme you're going to use, how you're going to catch the jurors and help them remember it when they're back there deliberating. In this episode, we're going to pull back the curtain and expose the best kept secret of mock trial.
As Ben said, it's time to talk secrets, and today we're going to be discussing case theory. Don't worry, we're going to get to themes. But first, in order to have a theme, you got to know what the heck is going on in the case. So you already know how to read the case. Now we're taking these parts, we're putting it together into something that we can sell to the judges. So a case theory is just how you're going to present those facts through the witnesses and the evidence to either prove the elements if you're the plaintiff or rebut the claim if you're the defense. So, Ben, when you're looking to construct a case theory after you read the case, you've made your T charts, you have your timeline, how do you go about deciding what is this case about from the perspective that I have to take on? Why is a case theory important? You can listen to us say it's the best kept secret, or you can say, well, yeah, I need to, but what about the idea of sitting down and finding a common thread is going to help your scores increase in mock trial?
It's going to help the people that are listening understand what your case is about. So the biggest thing about mock trial is when someone walks away from a mock trial, the judge or the jurors or the scoring judges, they'll say, okay, that team was trying to tell me a story about whatever you were trying to tell them about. That is the number one thing you want. If your theory does that, it's a successful theory. You want it to be kind of concise, very clear. Each witness has to help your theory. There can't be any holes between the witnesses. So they all prove your theory and none of them detract from it. A constant storyline throughout.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. When we're saying case theory, I don't mean theme, right? I'm not saying it has to be some sort of alliteration or anything. We're talking about, if you're the plaintiff in a negligence case, it was that the defendant was negligent, right? Duty, breach, cause harm. And I'm going to prove these things by these facts. And if you're the defense, it's perhaps mistaken identity in a criminal case. It's the wrong guy. That is the case theory, right? That is how you're choosing to present the facts. Before you get to your favorite quote or, some sort of kitschy phrase, you need to know what you're proving or what you're going to have your witnesses focus on. You can't just get up there and say, hey, what's your name? And, expect to get tens. And it's important to remember that your judges have not usually read the case, right? It's very rare that you're going to have judges who are as informed about the case as you are. And that's the thing that's easy to forget. You spend all of this time practicing these cases and you think, oh, well, it's clear. This is what happened. But you have to remember that the judges are hearing it most likely for the first time in opening statement. And that's where you're going to want to start. What is the thread that we are going to continue to pull at throughout the case so that you understand what our narrative is? Make them feel smart, make them come to those conclusions that they understand what's going on. Your scores are going to go up. Leave them confused, not know what's going on. They're going to ding you, and your scores are going to go down.
That's the most important thing. If I walk away from this right now, do I know what happened? And that's very difficult to do because none of this actually happened.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, right? We all act like, oh, yeah, well, Mr. Jones over here, he clearly got hit by the speeding motorist, right? But these people aren't real. And so you have to communicate not just to someone who wasn't there, to someone who never could have been there because it's all made up. And so you need to be very clear in your own mind, in your team's mind, what even happened before you're going to be able to sell it to somebody else successfully. All right, Ben. So if I'm the plaintiff or I'm the prosecution, I've got a burden to prove. What is it that I'm going to do? What am I going to focus on for a case theory?
If I'm the plaintiff or the prosecution, when I make a theory, the most important thing for me to think about is what are the elements that I have to prove? The elements are the things that I have to prove to the jury to convince them to find in my favor. So if I'm the plaintiff for the prosecution, I have to prove those things. I have to put them in my theory.
All right, that seems easy enough, right? I've got elements. I've kind of got a checklist. But what if I'm the defense? What if my job is really just to get up to say, no, what should I focus on in that case?
If I'm the defense, I'm going to think about the elements and I may take what you call a shotgun approach, shoot for them all a little bit. Or I may take a more precise approach and say, you know what, in this case, I'm really just going to focus on identity. We all agree that the victim was murdered, but the question is whether the defendant murdered the victim. So I'm going to tell the story that my guy, my defendant, didn't kill the victim. And that's my theory. So you've got two options as the defense, kind of the shotgun approach, or you can kind of drill down and zero into one issue that if you make it a big enough deal, may overcome the plaintiff or prosecution.
All right, so we just spent a bunch of time saying what you need to prove for your elements. And in the real world, you absolutely do. You've got a client, you've got the government, you've got a burden. But Ben, it's is fake. So, what about mock trial might be a little bit different when we're focusing on case theories, when what we care about is not money or putting someone in prison or freedom, it's points on a ballot.
The big secret is it doesn't matter. In every single judge's presentation that I've sat through or I've conducted, I've either heard or said, please do not judge these students based on whether you think they would win or lose the case. There's a separate conversation to be had about whether judges listen to these judges' presentations and whether they follow that rule that we tell them to follow. But let's assume they do, okay? And that's how mock trial should be run. There are cases out there that we try to balance them, we try to make them perfect. And, it's a toss up on who's going to win or lose. But some cases just have really bad facts for the defense, particularly if you're in a criminal case. The prosecution normally has better facts because it's a heavier burden for the prosecution. So they need to balance out the case by giving the prosecution really good facts. Okay. If you've got a criminal case like that, a judge may walk out and say, ooh, even though the prosecution had such good facts, the defense still would probably win. But I don't care, so I give my ballot to the defense because they were the better team in mock trial. I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. And in an ideal world, that is how it works. So while we spent all this time talking about the elements and why the theory is important, it is. The judges need to walk out thinking, okay, I know what happened in this made up make believe world. They did a good job telling a story, but they don't need to walk out thinking that you won the case. It's not about the elements, it's about the story.
And that's why the theory is important, right? If you don't have a story to sell, you may have the funniest witnesses, the best expert, and you could lose because at the end of the day, they're just like, why does this witness called? Part of that score that they're putting on the ballot is you fit that witness into your theory. That common thread you start at the opening, that you finish with the closing, and they can say, I feel smart because I know where this person fits in this bird's eye view of the case they gave me. They made me feel smart. I was entertained, 9-10 versus, I was an entertaining witness or they did a good job with the facts, but I'm not really quite sure why they called them. Yeah, you're probably looking at somewhere in the 6 to 8 range, and that could be the difference between winning and losing a ballot. So what you're going to want to do when you're constructing that theory is get as close as you can to the elements, get as close as you can to really doing what you're supposed to do for that side of the case or party, and then focus on, all right, what do we have that's going to maximize our talent for the students that we have to play the parts that we need to get up on the stand to entertain them, but also make sure they understand what our story is.
Okay, so we've talked about what really is, I think, the most important part of a real trial, a mock trial. It's the theory of the case, the story that you're selling, the through line. But there's another T word, TH word, in fact, THE word, in fact, that anyone who's anyone in mock trial has heard of. And it's a theme. Neal, I know you have very strong opinions about themes. Do you want to share those with our listeners?
I hate writing themes. I just hate it. I think it gets too bogged down, and we need to have some kitschy phrase. We need to have some alliteration. We need to have a quote. I really hate quotes. But look, I'm going to acknowledge this. Your judges are going to look for it, right? And at the end of the day, this is something where you're trying to make the judges happy, because if the judge is happy, your score goes up. I always tell my team, get the theory down. Get everything in place and let the theme kind of come from that, because if your theory isn't down, don't force the theory out of a theme that you like, right? It should go vice versa. The theory should always come first so that you have a through line, so that, yes, you have a phrase that's easy to repeat and something that is memorable. But most themes are easily flipped. Most themes can generate an eye roll. Okay, have them because the judge expect it. But I think sometimes people spend way too much time and energy trying to come up with some catchy theme, and they miss theory. And then they're left wondering, why are our scores bad? We had this funny phrase, or this quote matches perfectly. It's because it's hard to have a through line on a theme, right? I mean, doesn't that make sense, Ben? Like, if you have a catchy phrase, how are you going to make every witness say it? I mean, that usually leads to a lot of eye rolls.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. I mean, it's difficult for the theme to be worked through in every single presentation in a believable manner. And when I think of a theme, I know we're kind of going against the grain here, but I really believe in this, that the theme is not what makes or breaks the case. It is the theory that makes or breaks the case. A theme is a vehicle for your theory. It should be a really good delivery mechanism. It's like the French fry for ketchup. No one eats French fries because they like French fries. They eat French fries because they want to taste whatever sauce is served with the fries. So your theme is like that, but that big vat of sauce is your theory.
I mean, at the end of the day, when I hear, and I've seen it, especially when you have people who are very mock focused, you're going to have a witness who's going to be like, ha ha, here it comes, theme. It's not believable. And I think that's what was important in what you said. Is it expected in mock trial? Yeah, maybe. But if you can have a theory and the theme kind of echoes it, and then we hear the theory and the witness, it should attach to the theme, right? I don't need my witness to say cold, cunning, and cold blooded if that is my theme, because that's not how witnesses talk. And so if you can have a theme, great. And if you can carry through, great. But I wouldn't sacrifice realism just to score some sort of point because you got your witness to say it, especially if they're a crying witness or a doctor. I mean, that's just not believable as showing a command of the facts and theory and being persuasive and engaging.
Now that we've sufficiently admonished you that we don't really care for these, it is helpful, because we recognize that mock trial judges want these, to know how to make them. I do not write out potential themes when I'm reading a case. I think that's counterproductive to the theme creation process, because it needs to be organic. You need to just think of it. The best themes are like when I'm driving. Oh my gosh, bam, that's the theme. Or when you're in the shower thoughts. Some of my best mock trial thoughts were had in the shower, because you're just not thinking about really anything. You're just kind of doing something. And then organically the themes come in. I would not freak out if you don't have a theme within the first month of having the case. That's not a problem. I would not freak out if you go to some scrimmages or even some tournaments without a theme. Not a problem. By the end of it, when you're at a qualifying tournament, you should probably have one, just so the judges can check the box and say you had it. But I'm not freaking out about this, leading up into tournament season.
I agree. To me too. And again, as much as I struggle and said, "Oh, I hate them," I'm going to think about them, and I'll look to lyrics. I'm not saying I quote lyrics, right? But that I'm going to take a theme from a lyric, or something that moves me in something I'm reading, or something that I watched, or just in everyday conversation, somebody will say something like, "Oh, hey, I could play with that here or there, or twist it a little bit here." Now we've got a theme. And I think the other thing to do is be very flexible with your themes. People who lock in and say, we need 3 words and alliteration. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you try to get too locked into one thing. Be flexible and allow the case to breathe and dictate the theme.
So now we've just told you exactly how mock trial consumes every waking moment of our life, because we're always thinking about this kind of stuff.
It's very true. But at the end of the day, what we gave you is important, which is you make sure you have a theory, right? Make sure that you focus on the elements, because if you can make the judge think, I get this, your scores go up. If you're on the plaintiff or prosecution, you're going to focus on the elements. It's kind of paint by numbers. That's what they expect you to talk about. Get as close as you can with the time you have and the number of witnesses you have. And if you're on the defense, sometimes it's a nuh-uh, we didn't do it, and we're going to make it about the burden. And sometimes you've got an affirmative defense, or you have something that you can say it's an identity issue or it's a causation issue. And you can pinpoint and kind of snipe at the plaintiff's theory. Those can be effective too. But you have to make sure that your witnesses tell a cohesive story so that your scores go up. Once you've got all that in place, you'll find a theme. It'll come to you.
Next time, we're going to talk to you about how to implement your theory through testimony and evidence in your case in chief.